Hello there everybody and welcome to the next episode of Weekly Hunting Tasks Ironman. I am particularly pleased with my progress this week, so be sure to pay attention because there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. On Monday, as soon as the weekly tasks have re-rolled, I have decided to once more go for the beginner set of tasks. While the adept level might seem very enticing thanks to all the high ticket creatures that roam that list, we could also stumble into a task that would absolutely block our progress for the week. I think until we get our gear sorted and a couple more levels behind our belt, we are going to stick to the beginner tasks. At first glance, the list wasn't anything special. When it comes to the weekly tasks, we had to kill a bunch of rugged rabbit wolves, quorum assassins, dwarf soldiers, minotaur archers, tarantulas, pirate ghosts, gargoyles, and blood crabs. I was especially disappointed to see another bunch of rabbit wolves on my list. Last week we had to do a bounty for the regular rabbit wolves and it was an absolute slog. It's probably going to be no surprise that it is first on my list. I went there, camped myself in a cage, one of the only two places where these wolves spawn, and after a little bit of bickering from a particularly unpleasant idiot, I was able to wrap this one up in just about an hour. Most of this was done on a stream. If you're interested in watching my streams, be aware that there is no schedule and they happen like once a week, so yeah, good luck catching those. I sold my loot and was just about to head to the next task of quorum assassins when the boys from my guild let me know that they are going to be doing the desert quest. Since it's one of those quests that don't require you to actually kill a single creature, and I already had the crossbow saved up from last week's tasks, I decided to tag along for a nice payout of 125 platinum coins. That was going to boost my spending for a while. I also remembered to grab a scarf that you can find in the maze on a corpse. One additional point of armor isn't that big, but it's still going to come in handy. With the quest out of the way, I was able to grab promotion and now as a royal paladin head to the task at hand, being quorum assassin scouts. My next target were going to be the gargoyles and blood crabs. Now, there is a place in Mariana where you can hunt both of these creatures at once, as well as some others. In order to unlock access to Mariana, you have to go through a number of chores. Those including finding a ring, going to deliver some messages, and preparing a love poem. With the power of Wikipedia, I was able to prepare all the necessary items ahead of schedule and headed to Liberty Bay. The only dangerous creature that could actually stand in my way during this quest were a bunch of tarantulas, which just so happened to be on my hunting task list. So, in other words, I could simply clear them out and not worry about having to tank them or anything like that. A little bit more legwork and I've already found my way on Mariana. Now, the whole quest line requires you to do a little bit more stuff, but as it turns out, I already had access to the island, as well as the dungeon, so I did not do anything more. I ventured into the depths of this very suspiciously placed and overly populated with different creatures dungeon, noticed that it contains not only gargoyles and blood crabs, but also tarantulas, which I was able to knock out, received a quick and clean upgrades of my leggings into brass legs, and to my horror realized that I have already completed tarantulas and gargoyles, while not even being a third of the way there for the blood crabs. I had prepared a rather elaborate plan for this week, so I did not want to spend any more time looking for blood crabs in a spawn that was not as abundant with them as I expected. Instead, I decided to waste even more time completing the quest line that I previously chose to ignore and making my way into a weird dungeon that I've never been to, filled with a bunch of turtles, tortoise, and blood crabs. Even though there was a decent amount of blood crabs, there was also a lot of other people hunting for those. Not to mention, I managed to get lost in the dungeon. Still, it did not take long for me to find my way out, and I was ready to move on to the next task, this time dwarf soldiers. I also could not come up with any fancy, useful way to deal with those, so I just headed to Khazard-dûm and started smashing. Throughout the week, I've been re-rolling my prey as soon as I could. There was a very particular creature that I wanted to roll on that list in order to be able to do a certain action, but we are going to get into the details of that later. Just know that it did not happen just yet. More importantly, having killed the dwarf soldiers, I was raised to level 45. It is a very special level that allows all paladins to start enchanting their spears. Enchanted spears are stronger than royal spears, they deplete less often, and most importantly, they have a range of 4 tiles rather than 3. They also have a considerable advantage over bows and crossbows, namely, you can wield a shield with them and they cost almost absolutely nothing. At some point, Sipsov decided to remaster the way Paladin works. Instead of having the 3 classic types of arrows, being regular arrows, poison arrows and burst arrows, they have also added a lot of tiered arrows as well as bolts that could be used depending on your level. Of course, these are quite powerful and it is usually recommended that you use them as soon as you unlock them. The existence of these arrows, as well as multiple new bow and crossbow upgrades, made it so that enchanted spears, which used to be a staple of paladin combat, were made kind of obsolete. However, since we are a very poor Ironman, we cannot overlook how useful these are. Thanks to our high skills, we are not going to be lacking in damage at all. Additional defense from the shield we're wielding is going to come in handy when facing stronger creatures. And finally, a cost of a single enchanted spear is a mere 9 GP, which is the cost of a single spear in a shop. We do of course have to enchant it with our mana, namely 350, but with the recent updates to regeneration of mana without having to eat food, as well as double mana regeneration in depot, we have a very affordable and very powerful option for our weaponry. Not to mention, now I have an excuse to mana sit in depot all day and raise my magic level even higher. Despite all this hyping up of enchanted spears, my next target is going to require me to wield a bow. Now, I need to remind you the exact rules of my challenge. I am not allowed to hunt for creatures that are not on the hunting list. However, if a creature on the hunting list shares a spawn with some other creatures, I am also allowed to hunt them. Now, I said I won't abuse it a lot, but I'm indeed going to abuse this rule a little bit. The creature on the receiving end of the abuse this time are going to be wasps. One of the best spawns for the creature I was going to hunt next requires me to pass the Barbarian test. It's not exactly a difficult quest, but there is one thing that you need to provide in order to be able to pass. There is a random amount of honeycombs that you will require in order to prepare mead that you then need to prove you are able to hold. It took me a while to find a place that would have both a creature on my list as well as a wasp, but eventually I found this one spot in Plains of Havoc. In the middle of those lands there is a camp of cyclops and minotaurs, including minotaur archers. Those being on my weekly list, I was obviously allowed to hunt in this area. And it just so happens that just outside this camp there is a spawn of a couple wasps. Now, it may seem to you that I have completely disregarded killing minotaur archers and instead focused solely on the wasps, and you are absolutely right, I did that. I could not afford to get rid of my minotaur archer task just yet, because I had more important plans for it later. It did not take long for me to obtain my first and then second honeycomb. Now, I don't know how many you need on average, but I decided to give it a go because it was starting to get late. I was lucky enough to only require 1 honeycomb in order to pass the test. Of course, not before having dealt with the other, more trivial parts of the exercise. The reason why I wanted to pass the test is access to the island of Nibbalor. If you've been wondering why I haven't commented on my delivery list just yet, this is the reason. The delivery tasks are still absolutely awful for Ironman, especially those of lower levels. However, unlike last time, I have finally rolled an item that I may be able to deliver this week. That being the Strange Helmet. Strange helmets have identical stats to steel helmets, however, they also drop from much stronger creatures than usual, and, being also a rather uncommon drop from most of them, this makes it a very rarely used item. Most notable creatures that drop strange helmets are vampires, dragon lords, and ice golems. Ice golems seemed like they would be most within my reach. I decided to give them a shot. It didn't take long for me to realize there's much more that I can do about them. You see, within that cave in Nibbalor, there's not only ice golems, but also crystal spiders. Sure, they do pack a punch, and they can probably delete me within 2 or 3 turns if they roll well, but if they don't, then I stand a chance of dropping some truly amazing gear upgrades. Their most threatening ability, being haste and slow that they apply very often, can be mitigated by one of their drops, a time ring, which just so happens to drop often enough for me to be able to slap it on whenever they get hasted. That, paired with a smart use of some energy bombs, soon bore fruit in the skin of some very sexy legs, the night legs. Funny enough, it took me an evening or two of hunting to realize that ice golems and crystal spiders are both tasks at Grizzly Adams. Slightly embarrassed but not dejected by this discovery, I picked the tasks up and started slowly working on them. I am still unsure what my stance is on killing the bosses of those tasks. The previous ones I did had no bosses, but this time it was going to be different. Every time you kill 300 ice golems and 300 crystal spiders, you're allowed to face a boss version of them. There was, however, an issue with this, because they would not count for my weekly tasks and they did not drop the strange helmets, meaning technically they were not on the list. You could argue that the task itself is a quest and the boss fight is a quest reward, which is the explanation I might use in the future if I run into a task that has an interesting boss, but in this case these bosses dropped nothing that was really of value to me, so I decided not to jinx it and just skip them this time. My valorous conviction was quickly rewarded with another amazing drop, the knight armor. Now I had the full knight set. I have also stacked 2 more strange helmets, which honestly I should have worn with this set. The steel helmet in my inventory is really clashing. The strange helmet being a little bit darker would be so good in that slot. I do that later, but for now it's just going to bug me. Most of my free evenings went to hunting for these strange helmets as well as ice spiders. However, it quickly became apparent that I was not going to be able to get enough for the weekly task. I finished the second set of 300 kills and moved on to the next thing. At this point it's Sunday already, so I don't really have much time, especially if I want to edit this video. First of the last 2 creatures on my weekly hunting task was the pirate ghost. I did not want to attempt this one before I raised my levels a little bit. I heard that there's a large amount of them on the treasure island, but just to be extra safe I wanted to at least have the divine caldera spell to be able to ward off large amounts of enemies at once. It quickly became apparent that I did not need to go that far, but it was still a very nice thing to have. By the way, it was very lucky of me that I rolled Pirate Marauders last week, because otherwise I would not have the pirate treasure map necessary to enter this dungeon. I have no idea where I would hunt pirate ghosts otherwise. And with this beautiful task out of the way, there was only one last thing for me to do. You can probably see it already. I have left the Minotaur archers for the last task. Why did I do that? Because obviously I planned on clearing a quest that involves those creatures. Normally I would not be able to clear this quest, at least I wouldn't feel completely fair doing it, if it weren't for the very thing that we just gave up on getting a moment earlier. Remember when I mentioned that strange helmets drop from Dragon Lords as well? Yes, that pretty much covers all the creatures that you can find in the Deeper Fibula quest. Minotaurs with Minotaur archers and dragons with some Dragon Lords. In other words, the entire area of the Deeper Fibula quest was fair game that I could hunt at and of course, which I could clear. I initially planned on going there as soon as I hit level 50, which is the requirement. However, I was a little bit worried. No matter what you say, there is still going to be a bunch of Dragon Lords there, and they really pack a punch if they really get their mind to it. The reason why I was in a little bit of a rush with these is because it was a rapid respawn event. Creatures that you kill reappear way faster than usual, which you can imagine is not ideal where you're facing strong enemies that you want to clear once and be over with. I was able to get level 50 before that weekend, but I chickened out and instead decided to bide my time like a fool. Remember when I mentioned trying to roll for a specific creature on the prey system? I of course meant the Dragon Lords. Miraculously, on the last day of this week, it just so happened that I rolled them. Not only did I roll them, I rolled a defense prey of a decently high magnitude at that. That gave me enough of a push to give it a full-hearted attempt, even though it was rapid respawn already. As is very often the case, I have completely overestimated how much of a trouble it is going to be. I went in there, I slapped some Minotaurs around, I realized that the creatures there are blockable. In other words, if you kill something, it's not going to respawn. That is, as long as you stay in its area. I picked up a spoon that I know that I will need later. I then learned that the browse field function does not work with these corpse containers, which meant I had to lure Dragon Lords and have them cast their fireball spell in order for it to override the flames. Then, while waiting for a long time for the flames to go out, I realized I could have just cast the energy bomb that I have, which lasts way shorter, and it would do the same thing. And finally I proceeded to panic a little and not grabbing some of the rewards, but I still was able to exit this place with the warrior helmet, with a tower shield, with a dwarven ring, as well as 2 lucky drops of a dragon hammer and a serpent sword. After all that, there was still a couple of minotaur archers for me to deal with on my weekly hunting list. I paid a visit to the Horned Fox hideout, as always in hopes to meet the boss that can sometimes spawn outside of the task that Budrik gives you. Not getting lucky once more, I simply killed enough to complete the task and got out of there as soon as possible to avoid getting surrounded. And with that, we concluded our week 2 recap of the hunting list challenge. Or whatever you call it. If you have like a good catchy idea for a name, just put it in the comments, because I can't come up with nothing. We are a respectable level 59 on the cusp of level 60. We are looking forward to the next list, which is probably going to be novice again. Let's be honest, we can't handle some of the medium bestiary creatures that roam there. We are just 5 strange helmets short of being able to complete our first delivery task, which is a shame, but then again we really profited off of that one, so we cannot complain. And who knows, maybe next week we'll be able to make something out of it. With the 675 points we earned this week, and last, we are going to be just about 1% done with our base outfit of Feral Trapper. As always, thank you so much for watching. We have recently hit the magical threshold of 1k subscribers, which is quite amazing. Thank you very much everybody. It seems like this series is getting really popular and I am very motivated to continue it, so let's see how it goes. Let's all hope for the best. Feel very welcome to subscribe if you haven't yet, leave me a comment if you feel like it, and join our guild or Discord if you wanna. That's it, take care and goodbye.